Hi everyone, my name is Wes Lawton and I am a Grief Support Services Manager at Hospice of Michigan. Sorry about the weird background, I'll try to stay still here. I cover Macomb County and I am a co-facilitator for the Men Overcoming Loss group, along with my colleagues Will Gasper, David Keller, and Matt Biolet. Um, and I am here right now to share a summary of our recent group, the presentation from our group, which took place on January 19th. And so I will share with you some of the information that we went over there, as well as a couple of the things that happened at the group, just to give you an idea of what you missed or what you were present for if you're reviewing this video. And be happy to have you join us live in the future if you're able to, but even if not, we wanted you to be able to benefit from the educational material that we presented. So let me go ahead and share the presentation. All right, should be able to see that. So as you can see, we talked about changing identities and roles. And as I noted at the group, this is really an issue that I think everybody who loses a significant person in their life faces, whether it's a spouse, a child, or a parent, or even a dear friend, or some other relation that you may have. We talked about, well, I mentioned a picture that's in my parents' house, and I think it's on this picture. I was trying to remember at the group, and I should have asked them. But I think it was a picture, or maybe it was just something my mom talked about. But it's a word that is Ubuntu, and I think that it's Swahili, but don't quote me on that. But the point is that the meaning is that basically I am who I am because of my relationships to the people around me. And that's a very collectivist way of thinking. It's not maybe as common or popular in Western American society, but I believe it's true. I think that that's certainly a valuable way of looking at our own identities and the way that we understand ourselves to be. Think of myself as my wife's husband, my son's father, my parents' child, and so on. And so when you lose that person or lose one of those people in your life, you have to change how you think of yourself, and others are going to see you differently as well. And so adjusting to that is just one of the many big challenges that you need to face after a loss. So that was the main focus of the presentation. Let me go to the next slide here. So we need to ask ourselves certain questions like, where do I fit in now? What purpose does my life have now? What would my loved ones say to that question? What purpose does my life have now? We talked in the group about how it is valuable to ask yourself what your loved one would say about your life, about your choices, about your direction. Although in some cases also, it can be valuable to certainly ask that question and consider it, but also consider the fact that your life looks different now, and you have different opportunities because your loved one is not with you. And so maybe you would consider what your loved one would have to say, but go a different direction, and that's also okay. Or maybe you would go the direction that your loved one would have you go, if that's clear to you. And of course, that can be very helpful as well. And again, that first question, where do I fit in now? Think about our social circles, our activities, and those kinds of things might change. We talked about how your identity and your roles in life develop over the course of your entire life. And Dave, my colleague, pointed out how we go through role changes a little bit more frequently than you might think. When time passes, when you have a job change, when you have a child leave the home, when you move, when you may have an illness, or you can just fill in the blank, and you have to adapt to those changes and rethink your identity and your roles. The thing is that a lot of those changes happen a little more gradually over time, or you may have expected them ahead of time, and so you were mentally preparing or preparing in other ways. When a loved one dies, even if you've had some mental preparation, which isn't true in every case, then you never feel quite ready. Or at least the vast majority of people don't feel quite ready, not 100%, for that person to just be gone. Our minds can't really be prepared for that kind of a loss in most situations. And so it feels like a drastic, abrupt change that you need to adjust to in terms of your identity and roles and other areas. Okay, so we talked about developing a new self-identity, and this is part of Alan Wolfeld's 6 Needs of Mourning, which I won't try to quote for you, but I believe it is the 4th one, if I'm not mistaken. You can look those up online if you're interested in what they all are, and we'll be doing further presentations that are inspired by those different tasks. It's a model that we find helpful in Hospice of Michigan, and there are other good ones as well out there. But developing a new self-identity is considered a key part of mourning, of working through your grief, getting to a place of peace. So as you can see, you need to redefine your identity or define it for the first time in some cases, and discovering the roles that you're going to be playing in life. Part of who you are now was formed by your relationship with the person who is gone. And that can actually be a really helpful way to honor their memory, is to think about the ways they made you who you are and to live those out. You know, particularly things, of course, that you're proud of. They may have made you a more compassionate person, more thoughtful, more punctual, more humorous. You know, you can think in your own life, and you can really dedicate that part of your life to the person who has died and keep them with you in that way, if that's something that you're inclined to do. I think that's a beautiful way to honor somebody's memory and keep them with you in a very real way, even though, of course, it's incredibly different and still difficult. The way that you defined yourself and the way that society defines you has changed. As I mentioned, and this isn't really the focus of this presentation, but other people in your life see you differently now as well. And they may not be quite sure exactly how to place you because of the change that you've undergone, because of the death of your loved one. And there's little that you can do to control that, really, unless you have a direct conversation about it or something. But of course, you're on the journey likely to figure that out for yourself as well. Excuse me. So it's just something to be aware of, and aware that your relationships likely will change. And that's difficult. That's really a secondary loss. You know, one very common situation is that the couples that you and your spouse were friends with, perhaps, it may not relate to you in the same way. It may not be as natural for you to spend time with them because you don't share that piece of your life. And again, that's sad and it's difficult. And it doesn't happen in every case. Or again, maybe the relationship simply changes even if you don't lose it. And you may find yourself drawn to people and connecting with people who you wouldn't have before. And that can end up being a wonderful thing over time. But again, when you're in the middle of it, it feels tumultuous and awkward, and it's difficult. You need to re-anchor yourself, reconstruct your self-identity. This is long and hard work. Again, it doesn't happen overnight. It's going to be a period of months after you lose your loved one to where you start to feel comfortable in your identity, and really years probably before you get to a place where you're as comfortable as you were before. And so it's important to be patient with yourself and with the process. You may discover some positive changes as you work on this. We talked briefly in the group about how grief changes you and it teaches you some wonderful things. And I know that after your loved one has died, hearing, you know, you're just going to learn so much through this process. It's not really a helpful thing because you've got to work through all your pain and all the different difficult feelings that you're experiencing. Got to express, you've got to get support. And only as you do those things over time do you start to realize and open up to the lessons that you do learn. Not that your loved one died to teach you some lessons. I don't think that's a very helpful perspective, although it may be for some people. So that's, of course, okay and allowed if that's you, but not something that I choose to focus on. And yet it's something that happens. You know, we do grow in compassion and in wisdom and strength in some areas. Even if you soften in other areas, it can be sort of a soft strength. You may be less judgmental. And so these are identity changes that you may end up embracing, and there may be others as well. It's one of the lessons that you learn over time is how to allow yourself to appreciate, enjoy, and celebrate some of the changes that have taken place since your loved one died, even though it's not a welcome event in your life. You can still find ways to find good things that come through it. So we considered this question. We sort of meditated on it for a little while together as a group. I'll just read it. I used to be blank, and now that blank, probably now that so-and-so has died, I am blank. This makes me feel blank. So how do you feel about the change that you are undergoing? It's another thing that I want to point out because it comes up in some of my work with other bereaved. It's that you have changed almost certainly since your loved one has died, and you're in a state of change. You have not arrived. And so there may be things that you don't like about your life right now. I'm pretty certain I can bet that there are. But understand that you're going to continue changing, and that you won't really know until you're able to look in hindsight how you are changing. So again, I can only really encourage patience through that process. I encourage you to take a moment, maybe to write out this statement or fill in the blanks in your mind. It's pretty powerful for a couple of the guys in the group. And one of them, I believe, shared about where they were at with that as well. So we talked about, really, I think this is the next task in Alan Wolfelt's model, and it's related to the last one, even though it's separate. And so I'll go through this real quick with you as well. Searching for meaning, of course, and talked about how, well, before I get into it, I think one of the important things that I tried to point out was that so many of the questions that come up for you during your grief journey will not have answers, or perhaps will not have answers that are helpful to you. And that is okay. It's not something that is useful to judge as good or bad. It just sort of is what it is. And yet, it's the actual searching that is important. You may have a question that you already know in your mind doesn't have an answer, but you still need to ask the question. You still need to search through it and ponder it and revisit it in many cases, multiple times over a long period of time, sometimes. And it's through that process of searching and questioning that you start to find some peace, even without a solid answer in some cases. And of course, in some cases, you do find an answer, and that can be a wonderful thing as well. I would say in most cases, there is an answer, but it's not one that is going to necessarily bring you the peace that you're looking for, that you find through questioning and searching. I related it to journaling and how journaling, what you write, of course, it does matter to an extent, and you can look through your old journals and see how much you've grown. There are some real benefits in that way, but I think the most therapeutic part is just the act of putting pen to paper and expressing your thoughts and feelings, and how it ends up, if it flows well, if it's beautiful, if it's readable, if it makes any sense. Those things are secondary, similar to searching for meaning. So it's natural for you to question the meaning and purpose of your life as it is now. Why and how questions may surface uncontrollably. Why did this happen? How will I go on? So again, you may know, why am I even asking these questions? That may be a question that comes to mind. Why can't I get through this? I know that I'm not going to understand why this happened. There is no why. That might be something that you have already decided. Maybe there was, some reason, depending on how you look at it. But the questions surface. They're thoughts, and it's just like you learn, if you've ever learned about mindfulness. Thoughts enter your head, and you have very little control over, or really no control in many cases, which thoughts enter your head. And so you can't judge yourself for having those thoughts. What you need to focus on is what you're going to do in response to those thoughts. And it's similar with these kinds of questions. They're going to come. And so you can choose whether to let them go, whether to ruminate in them, whether to allow them to paralyze you, which can be hard not to do sometimes. We might question our philosophy of life or explore different religions and spiritualities. This can end up being a wonderful thing, although it can lead to secondary losses as well. I know from talking to many people that losing your religion, I believe it's an REM song, that can be a painful process. And it's certainly not inevitable. In fact, you may go deeper into your religion or into your faith, into your tradition. That may be a place of solace and strength for you. But it's also very natural to doubt and to question, and that's okay. And in fact, again, some wonderful things can come out of that, some amazing growth, even though I can't predict exactly what direction you may grow in. And even if it's not in a spiritual tradition, it might just be your philosophy of life, as the slide says. So you can expect, well, I don't know about expect, but if those kinds of things happen, you can understand that they are normal and to be expected. And there's room for that. Getting down on yourself, not allowing yourself to ask those questions is really a way of inhibiting your grief. Okay, so again, going back to those why questions, this is another exercise that you can do even as you watch this video or afterward. You can pause it, of course. Write down a list of why questions, that have come up for you since the death. Might be a long list, might be a short list. It can help to name those things. Go through them with a friend or a counselor who won't feel like they have to give you all the answers. Just be able to sit with a question. As I said, that is really the work of the journey that you're on. We consider this scripture verse, Matthew 5:4, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." And David, who's got a ministry background, shared some wonderful thoughts on this. But I think that the main point is that mourning is expected, even for those who have faith. And so whether it is searching for meaning, even questioning some of your previously held beliefs, or maybe it's unrelated to the searching for meaning. It might just be expressing your pain or talking through what you're thinking and feeling, certainly seeking support. This is all part of the journey that you need to go on after you lose somebody you love. That's the natural response that we really need to kind of submit to, even though there's the submission to it, and there's also the work that goes along with it. So it is both passive and active in that way. And even if you have faith, you can have faith that moves mountains, so to speak. Perhaps that God is in control, or whatever kinds of language you would use. You still got to grieve. And I talked to somebody recently about people like me who are grief counselors, or some work in some related field, who lose somebody they love, and about how having this knowledge, including some of the knowledge that I'm sharing with you today, it gives you the tools, but you still need to do the work. You still need to go through your grief. And I think the same can be said for those who have faith. It can be a wonderful tool. It can give you lots of benefits, but you still got to go through it. Okay, so that is the gist of it. Oh, I just wanted to share a couple things that happened in the group that were meaningful to me, and I think to others as well. One gentleman shared about how he, we talked about spirituality again, and that's a topic I believe we're going to go into more in a few months or so, but shared about how he considered himself, I believe he said agnostic, he may have said atheist, but I think it was agnostic, and about how the loss of his wife, if I'm not mistaken, it was, prompted him to, of course, ask, where is she now? Will I be reunited with her? And to go on a search in his faith. And he ended up reconciling science and Christianity, I believe, with his story. And that's proved to be a very meaningful thing. And I think he said he's involved in a church and everything. And it's wonderful to hear that brings him, again, that peace and that meaning as he's gone on that search. And he talked about how he wishes that he and his wife could have shared that element of their relationship together. And so, I would say to him now, even though I don't believe that I said this in the group, but just that living that out and embracing it can really be a way of honoring her memory, as this new element of his life and his identity has come through his grief. It wouldn't have happened without her. And of course, as he said, having the hope that he'll be reunited with her is very helpful and meaningful to him as well. And then the other thing that I thought was great was that we just ended up asking a guy how he was doing. And he had a really vulnerable moment. He expressed some of his feelings. And a lot of what he talked about had to do with his changing roles. He had gotten together with some friends and they had a wonderful time together. And perhaps he sort of suspended his understanding that his wife had died. He was able to sort of let that go for a moment, and that can be great to take a break like that. But getting back in his car and then getting home to the empty house was just so difficult, and he feels like he's moving backwards. And so that's a common thing that all the guys around the virtual room could relate to, a similar experience, and certainly to the feelings that he was experiencing. And I think that that's one of the great things about this group. And so actually that ends up being a very effective segue into talking about the benefits of joining live. So you can get feedback from other people about your own experiences, your own thoughts and feelings. You get to give that to others and participate in their grief journeys, to be one of those relationships that develops after losing your loved one, that you can even be thankful for, you can appreciate. And there's the healing group dynamic. Research shows that group therapy, even though we don't consider this a therapeutic group, but support groups like this can be just as effective as one-on-one therapy in a lot of cases, even though effective in different ways. You don't get the one-on-one attention from a professional, but you do benefit from the other members of the group. So it's one reason why I love support groups like this. And you do get to process with the trained facilitator. So that was for the in-person element, which isn't going on right now. But a little bit of that happens also in our virtual groups. So here's how to join. And I won't read through this, but I'll just let you know about that last one. Register at HOM.org. You can go to our website and click Grief Support up at the top. And from there, you can navigate. It says click here, and you can learn about all of our groups, including the Men Overcoming Loss group. You can also go directly there, which is HOM.org/virtual-touch. Oh, it's right here up at the top. So there we go. You can go right there if you choose to. So I'm trying to remember if there was anything else. I think that that's all that I have for you. Oh yeah, so I wanted to highlight that it's the first and third Tuesday of every month. This is still a new development for us. And the first Tuesday of the month, for those who may not know, is more of a support-oriented group, a little bit less structured. The facilitator, we've all been working together, the four of us, who I mentioned at the top of this video. We've been working together to have some different ideas and things to talk about. And so they'll have sort of something in their back pocket to talk about if nothing comes up. But our hope is that the members will come and share what's going on in their life, what their struggles are, what their challenges are, what their celebrations are, and that can provide topic for conversation and connecting and supporting. And a lot of beautiful things can come out of that. And so, as I said about how the education gives you the tools and how you still have to do the work, it's where some of the work takes place. That's how I conceptualize it anyway. And then the third Tuesday of the month, this is more of the tools. This is an educational focus group. And so that might be more your speed. Many guys are doing both groups, and I think that that's awesome if you have the time for that. But you can choose one or the other, whichever one is a better fit for you, or of course you can alternate, or whatever works. But wanted to offer both of those styles of group and to offer them a total of twice a month. And so I really wanted to emphasize that and let you know that that's going on and invite you to come. So again, you can register at these websites or at this website, and really would love to have you. So again, my name is Wes, and I thank you for listening and for considering the material that we had to offer in this last group. And so the next one will be taking place. Let me stop sharing. And February 2nd. So that's just over a week from now as of this recording. And that'll be that first Tuesday group that's more support focused. And then the third Tuesday is February 16th. And so that will be the educational group. And I don't have the topic in front of me, but I'm sure it'll be beneficial, hopefully just like this one was for you. So thank you very much. And everybody, please stay safe and consider joining us in the future. Thanks.